Because the police were everywhere, weren't they?
So the police was taking off a lot of doors. Everyone was like, well, what move are you making? Are you standing by Jacob or are you not standing by Jacob? Someone was dead.
Yeah.
Everyone's going to jail.
My name is Jacob Dunn. I'm an author, campaigner, and educator in restorative justice. In 2011, I threw a single punch that ended another man's life. And after 14 months in prison, I found myself homeless, unemployed, and struggling to find a sense of purpose. But I managed to get my life back on track. And now I help others do the same. Join me on this first season of Right From Wrong, where I speak to the people who were instrumental in my journey from punishment to redemption. This is Right From Wrong. Growing up in the Meadows sounds picturesque. The place gets its name from literally the meadows that were famously coated in a carpet of crocus flowers each spring. Trapped between the city of Nottingham to the north and the River Trent that meanders its way through the county to the south, it eventually became the perfect site for a council estate. The water of the River Trent coined the phrase watersman and the waterfront gang. You can still see the odd crocus flower if you look close enough. You can also see the odd drug dealer, a few packs of addicts marching around with purpose, and a load of good, down-to-earth people going about their daily business. One of those is my very close friend, Akai Douglas. Akai and I have experienced the ups and downs of growing up here. Akai was out the night I threw the punch and was part of a wider group of friends that I would regularly go out with on nights out. He saw me preparing to go to prison, was with me in court when I was sentenced. He visited me in prison and picked me up and brought me some new clothes on my release. Since then, we have become proud fathers and campaigners. I'm extremely proud of Akai for the man he has become and for being a friend I can always be honest and open with. Stick around till the end of the episode where Akai talks about his own extraordinary story of making a right from a wrong. So please welcome Akai to the show. It's an honour to have you as my first guest.
Well, wow, what a sort of amazing intro, to say the least. And again, just to sort of open up and just speak on the Meadows in general. One of my sort of takes of the Meadows is probably one of the most beautiful places really within Nottingham. It's got a beautiful river sort of running through. Even to just go sit down there on sort of like a nice summer's day, it's nice. Sort of reflecting on the darker side of the Meadows as well. It can be sort of like a dark and dingy place at times and very sketchy.
There's definitely a contrast between, you know, that part of the Meadows where the river runs through and the embankment, the Victoria embankment. Yeah. It's a big contrast.
Meadows, out of all the sort of places within the city, is quite isolating. And the reason in many ways it's called the Meadows is like when you come into Meadows, you more or less cross a bridge to get in, you cross a moat to get in.
Yeah.
And like for me, it's almost like it's its own little island, our group. And obviously the sort of like the other little groups within the area, we didn't mesh much outside of that community.
Yeah.
We had Bridgeford on our doorstep.
We had West Bridgeford, yeah. For the audience, how would you describe West Bridgeford?
Well, West Bridgeford is completely the flip side of, it's crazy, like we are divided, like imagine the River Thames, but just slightly narrower. And literally you've got probably one of the most affluent places within Nottingham, if not Nottinghamshire. And then literally you go across the bridge and it's like the complete opposite. It's like the flipped, it's hitting headlines for all the wrong reasons.
You could throw a stone over if you had a good throw, do you know what I mean, over the water. And I read a stat the other day that life expectancy in the Meadows compared to West Bridgeford, just over the water, is 6 years difference, life expectancy.
It's just this crazy transition of sort of looking across the water and seeing all that wealth. Like I described, it's like an island.
In my intro, I mentioned, you know, nights out. I wonder if you could try and describe to the audience of like how you describe nights out when we were like 18. Because we were trying to go in time before we were 18, weren't we? Like getting fake IDs or like trying to jump over fences and get in a bar.
I say we broke the barrier very early. I mean, I remember my first time ever going out, I was like 14, 15. I describe it as very like high octane. Obviously, there's a lot of testosterone flying around and a lot of alcohol. In many cases, drugs as well. Like even now, it sort of brings back a smile to my face. It was just young lads out for a good time. A lot of the time, it sort of ended in a fight, unfortunately. But it wasn't only us, there was a lot of other groups as well.
Mm.
And coming from the Meadows as well, it was a case of like, obviously there was rival gangs as such and things like that. So yeah, it was just energetic. It sort of bring back some good memories as well as obviously some sort of darker end.
What would you say? Any of the good moments in terms of that kind of side of things were just because like
I think it's the camaraderie, it's the togetherness.
yeah,
I didn't really see it then, but like it's the forming of us becoming men, being put into that world as such, and almost being around men. I remember like a lot of olders showing us the ropes sort of thing, and it's us. We didn't really realize it at the time, but it's that transformation of where it's like coming from the estate and like you said, drinking on a park to actually like standing amongst men in a pub and sort of feeling respected,
belonging.
Obviously, you're around a lot more women, and so yeah, it was just they're the sort of good times.
You mix alcohol with young men trying to impress each other, whether it was like pulling a girl or something more innocent, but then on the flip side, you'd also be more willing to kind of like
get involved
stuck in.
No, definitely. It's I think it comes with, again, the word testosterone. We're all sort of finding our level, and it's like we're raging young men. And it's a case of like, well, look what I can do, and I can do it better than you. And we are friends, but it's everyone likes to outdo the person next to him. There's a lot of competition there, but it's friendly competition, but it easily then turned into looking out for each other, watching each other's back, and then obviously competition again with other young men at times who are on the same level as us, but we're thinking, well, we're better than you. And if it turns into a sort of a fight, we're happy to get stuck in.
It's a competition, okay, if you don't want to go with us, like, we're going to back ourselves and confident that
but on the
every single person in our group is going to step in
and get involved and back the beef. That's as simple as it was.
There's a part in the play where it's like always stepping in. That's what my character goes, always stepping in. That was a belief. That was something that was expected. You always step in. It's easy to just look at the negative side of it, but it wasn't all like bad intentions.
No.
It was, a lot of it was kind of like just light-hearted fun, or it wasn't always violent.
A lot of the fights was in the moment, and if the fight comes, we're going to fight you. But like, we didn't like necessarily go out to target one individual as such. It wasn't premeditated in that way, but we was gearing for a fight. If you brought it to us, or if we seen a situation where it needed to be, we'd take it there, and it was that.
There was sometimes groups, potentially from more affluent areas of young people who maybe didn't feel that pressure to be as boisterous, should I say, as we might have been. Why do you think that was? Like, people from certain, because you knew, like, if someone was from a posh area or someone's from a different kind of like neighborhood, that they probably were just like more happy, like having a little dance, getting a taxi home, you know what I mean, as opposed to kind of.
I think it comes down to obviously our environment. I've thought like being brought up in the environment that we did. It's almost a case of like always watching our back. It's that sense of like always having to be ready to fight. Like, you don't know what's around the corner. When you walk around that corner, it could be nothing to do with you, but you could potentially be drawn then into a situation, and it's almost like fight or flight. And some people have just got that instinct, and some people haven't. It's within our community, I want to say 8 out of 10 people, like, it was just embedded in them to say, I will stand and fight. And then again, it comes down to reputation. And if you didn't fight, then it's like, well, why didn't you fight? Like,
why didn't you help me out?
What's wrong? So, and to have that contrast to someone who's come from more of an affluent area who hasn't had to face all them challenges as such, and not had to have that, that's been put underneath that pressure within their community.
Those expectations.
To walk down the street of an affluent area and not have any issues. Like, you've got more chance for someone saying hello and how are you, and your mum and dad probably know them quite well, and do you understand what I'm saying? It's more of that like upbeat and that happy place, and it's just
more
general
stability, and just not as many people around you kind of being bad influences. Not that, because this is the one thing I say. There's a lot of elders, right, who kind of might groom certain young people if they're lost, if they fall out of school, they don't know where to go. Like, they'll get exploited by older people. But I didn't ever feel like I was exploited by older generations. I could have been, and maybe some people tried it, but I felt like, and I think it's common amongst people from our area, is that, not necessarily our area, but any like area like ours, is that we kind of, I use the word groom each other.
Yeah, I was sort of in a similar situation to you where, like, I wasn't necessarily groomed directly, but indirectly and mentally, I was definitely groomed by just the environment.
Yeah.
It is a case of like, you need to sort of fit this model as such. Even before I knew it, grew up in an environment before that, just to like seeing people ride around and in nice cars and have like a chain. And I remember some of the olders sitting on the top of my street. They was pulling up in nice cars. These lot was always munching food. Like, it sounds crazy, but like these lot was getting McDonald's like 3-4 times a day, playing that pound. It used to think called like pound up the wall, like Wally, and be playing with like, it might be £50, and it's like whoever can get the pound closest to the wall wins all the money. And it's just seeing that, I guess, wealth, and obviously like it's inspiration. Like it's someone to aspire to be. And yeah, it comes down to a case of like, that was mental grooming for me, sitting on that fence of like, this is what I want to be. Like, they had nice gold chains. There was girls around at the time. It's sort of crazy times to think back, how that then sort of transpires into you wanting to be them and then almost becoming them as you grow.
Yeah. So we've talked about, what some of those nights out were like back when we were 18, 19. And tragically, what I'm now sometimes best known for is when it all went wrong. And when I threw a single punch that led to the death of James, and the aftermath of all of that. There was other one punch deaths in Nottingham, quite high profile ones.
Yep.
But no one ever thought that it happened to you. I'm just wondering what you can remember from that time.
Yeah, so even for myself, obviously not being there direct at the moment when you throw the punch, it still lives with me. It's sad times to reflect on, and obviously for James, but for yourself as well. And it wasn't an intentional punch, from what I can remember. It wasn't intentional in terms of, obviously the blow wasn't intention in to kill him, but the aftermath, it was just crazy.
Because the police were everywhere, weren't they?
Obviously, I had family members who was present at the time there. So the police was taking off a lot of doors. There was a lot of questions being thrown around. Everyone was like, well, what move are you making? What choice are you going to make? Are you standing by Jacob, or are you not standing by Jacob? And I think it was a case of some people were scared, genuinely, like people were scared, like as much as we could.
It was murdered then as well, wasn't it?
Yeah, we could put on this facade of like, oh yeah, like we're all these like big bad man and like everything's cool and like, yeah, it's a minor. But at the end of the day, like it's real shit. Like someone was dead.
Yeah.
And if not anything, like everyone's going to jail. Like if at this time they didn't know it was you.
Yeah.
So everyone's just on high alert. Like, we was there, we took part, it's joint enterprise.
Yeah.
And that's what everyone is saying. And I remember at one point my sort of name got mentioned it as well, although I wasn't directly there. It's our peer group. Like, they're looking back at CCTV, not only of that weekend, but they're looking potentially back at weekends before, and they're just trying to paint everyone in one picture. And we're like, well, if we can't pin it to one person, we're going to put it on everyone. Everyone's going to feel it. So it was just literally like anxiety, fear, and everyone was just living in the unknown. I think it was within like the first week or two, a lot of doors was getting taken off. I remember someone going on holiday, and they came back and they got arrested off the plane.
And then my mum's ass got raided as well.
The police was just everywhere, and obviously it wasn't even police. It was the murder squad. Like it was a manhunt for
who did it, and they're putting as much pressure on everybody as possible,
literally,
to find out the truth.
And rightly so. Like, a man's life's been taken. Obviously,
you would want that if you was
as much as we had this bravado back in the day of like, oh yeah, like, we're not going to snitch. Like, looking back now as a grown adult, I don't want to sitting across the table from you. Like, it's a man's life's been taken, and rightly so. There was a man on for you, but they didn't know it was you at the time. So it was our peer group. Like, we need to get these killers. So that was a massive thing that we all had to deal with for, I want to say, the best part of a couple of weeks. Like, it was crazy. Like, initially, directly after the punch, like crouching down behind the bin and trying to make phone calls and to see what's going on from people are saying, he's not moving, Jacob. And then you're thinking, shit. And then obviously sort of running back to the estate. But yeah, it was just crazy to even think that was all encapsulated at that time.
Yeah.
And that's even before obviously moving on to the trial and prison and punishment.
That's what happened, wasn't it? So then eventually the police, put enough pressure on people, were able to find out the truth. And then I basically went and handed myself in.
Yeah.
And said, well, I knew the police were after me. The police were at my mum's house. Come and hand yourself in, please. I kind of already had wind of what had happened. And then went and faced the music.
Yeah.
At that time, I didn't really want to take responsibility. And none of us were very good at putting ourselves in other people's shoes. We just think about ourselves and, we
and
just
the
don't know.
And the culture and all the pressures that had been put onto us.
Yeah. So then, one big thing that, is a big no-no in certain communities.
Yeah, we're heavily in our community.
Heavily in our community is not snitching.
Yeah. And just for people who don't really understand the word snitching, it means staying loyal to the code, staying loyal to your friend who stands to the left here, but also to the friend that stands to the right. Like it's that case of like, no matter what he does, we don't break this law of silence.
And we don't tell the police the truth if they come asking.
It's a case
you're
of
going to go no comment.
And that's it. It's not to incriminate you, but not to incriminate
anyone else
at the same time. So yeah, it was a massive. That was probably the number one unwritten rule. Like the first on the mark is just no snitching.
And so a big part of the story is that there were certain people that told the truth. Is how I like to word it now instead of calling them snitchers. But I wasn't so accepting. Like I've forgiven people that snitched in quotes because I needed them to do that. None of this would have happened in my journey if I was still running. Imagine if I was still on the run now, no one ever find out what happened, or still looking over my shoulder,
and the pain of the family,
and the pain of the family and what they're going through. Like it was the right thing for him to do with the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah.
But at the time, as we described, it was something that I was very angry about. So I'm filled with anger and self-pity at this stage, and I'm going to face the music at court.
Yeah.
What can you remember about that time?
There was a lot of anxiety flying about. Obviously, you didn't know exactly what was going to go off. I can remember your head was all over the place. Like, obviously, as friends, we were trying to support you as best you can and give you the support.
And then I went to prison, got my sentence. Can you talk to me a little bit about the times that you can remember when you came and visited me and then when I got out?
So I can remember at the few communications that we had, obviously like phone calls, like here and there. And I remember if I'm rightly thinking, we was like the only ones that visited you when you was in prison. And obviously I remember like initially seeing you when I've come in. Obviously it's been quite a few months now at this point. I was sort of taken back. I'm like, yo, like he's actually here. Like he's on the charge. He's been sentenced. And I remember sitting across the table for the first time. And for them people who have never really been to a prison, it's almost like sitting across a table. It's not very big. I remember there was probably a barrier of around, I want to say about 10, 15 centimetres, just like a little lip on the table. And there Jacob was. He was sitting in front of me. He'd been put on his charge. He'd been plastered all over the news. And like, here I am, like one of his only friends, alongside two of my other brothers at the time who was visiting you. And I can remember looking across the table, and I want to say he was holding it strong, but like I could see like he was kind of broken. Like it was a lot. Like you said, you went to they call it a young offenders prison, which is chaos. Like going to there and a men's prison is completely different. Like there's just testosterone, young people, and again there's other killers and there's people in there who intentionally kill people.
Yeah.
And so I remember sitting across the table, and like I remember you just having that conversation with us. We're just talking, and I just remember like I'm engaging in the conversation, but I'm not. I'm just sort of still taking in the minute. And I remember you explained to me at one point that like basically there's no support as such from other people within the prison. I remember you saying at one point that someone put a razor blade under someone else's door because they said that they was feeling like down, and there was expression that they couldn't really cope with prison.
Yeah.
And he was like, yeah, like. And man just pushed the razor blade underneath his door, and he was like, well, if that's how you're feeling, then do something about it.
So basically encouraged him to commit suicide.
To take his own life. And even then he was like, yo, like, that's a lot like to deal with. And obviously we can speak openly as men now, but then like obviously I'm giving the bro, they're like, no, that's mad, like, oh, that's crazy, like, you know, we are kind of gassing it up. But yeah, they're some of my memories to sort of touch on it as such. And then I didn't see you again actually. After that, actually, it was just sort of like a one-hit visit.
Some writing and stuff.
Yeah, just like writing back and forth, communications. And then I remember the day he was getting released. Like literally, like what I'd done was, well, what we did was, again, me and two of my brothers, we sort of whipped round everyone in the community, like all our friends and stuff like that. And I was like, well, no one's really been there for him in jail. And I remember seeing you in prison. You had them black shoes on.
Them black fur Perry's.
Yeah, black fur Perry's. And I was thinking, yo, like
the same shoes that went running through Market Square.
This is what I'm saying. The whole thing. I'm like, yo, like we need to sort him out.
And I had holes in them.
I remember you had holes in them. I felt, you know how bad I felt as a friend, yeah. And I think you didn't have too long on the scorecards left then.
Yeah.
So anyway, I whipped round a couple of the friends in our community. I was like, yo, listen, we need to put some money together. Go buy him a decent pair of trainers, get him some jeans and a jacket, because when he comes out of jail, if he comes out of jail in them same clothes there, like he's almost groaning as he come out. Like, I can't have that for a friend. Like that's my brethren. And like I'm holding him down. So, what's your take of stepping out them gates and obviously seeing us and having at least someone there?
Oh, it meant everything, because I felt obviously prison's lonely.
Yeah.
And that people don't like to admit that. Do you know what I mean? Like after a certain amount of time, you might get a lot of letters in those first few months, but after a while, people can't be asked. Do you know what I mean? And I don't blame them. Do you know what I mean? Like I know people that are in prison. Do you know what I mean? And I don't really write to them. Do you know what I mean? But it's just normal, and you just get forgotten about after a while. And a lot of people in prison feel angry about that. Like, oh, yeah, no one cares about me. Blah, blah, blah. But it's just life. Life moves on. Do you know what I mean? And but when I came out, it was good to just like have that love, basically.
Yeah.
Even though we just don't like using that word as men, do you know what I mean? Yeah. But that's what it was. It was like that love and that those
care.
friends and that care, and just feeling like somebody cared, basically. Do you know what I mean? And it's good to see my people again. And then it's just like just a whirlwind. Like, because then I think we went into town, we got a all you can eat Chinese, fed me up, and then dropped me off at probation. We then went and saw my probation officer, who will be speaking in a later episode. Like the rest of it's kind of a blur. And then there's a picture that I've got on social media of like all of us lined up in front of the car outside your mum's.
Yeah.
And, all of us are there, and it's just like New Year's Eve. And then, but I think the thing to mention after that was that there was a different mood about me. Because, it was all about trying to build my reputation a little bit, because I was lost. I didn't know what I was doing before I went in prison. Yeah. Just a bit lost, not knowing where I fitted in. I wasn't a successful criminal, but it wasn't like the worst one either. Yeah. Just didn't have the confidence to try anything else, a job or education or anything. But what did you think the mood was around people? Like when people come out of prison, there's always this like, everyone always kind of like has this like suspense in it, this like attention or.
Yeah, it is.
Because there's a lot of people coming in and out of prison, do you know what I mean? Like from our state.
Within our state and our community, I always say this, like people would give you more respect for going into prison and coming out and riding your time than if you got a job or started a business. Like they'd pat you on the back, you'd get more stripes and more street cred from going to prison, because that's all we knew. Like that's where it was. It's like, yo, you went to prison, you rided it out, rather than supporting people to get a job. Yeah. Yeah, and it's crazy to think that that's the culture, but that's what it was.
Akai, it was your birthday yesterday.
Yeah.
We are both olders now, it's fair to say. Now we're in our 30s. And you're a role model.
Yeah.
You're an inspiration to me as well. And now you're a campaigner. Tell me about how that came to be.
My experience started, I want to say, an unfortunate event, really, that occurred going back to 2018, where I was a victim of a knife attack, which came at a really difficult point within my life, already having 2 children, and obviously sort of set myself on a good path as such. So it was a surprise, to say the least, that it sort of happened at the time it did. And the circumstances was I got stabbed in the throat, which left me hospitalised. I went into a 5-hour emergency surgery to save my life. The family was sitting outside, like it was touch and go. That was the point in where a switch of sorts flicked in my head, and it was like, okay, I'm not really in this lifestyle anymore, but what can I do now? Where do I go from here? So option A was like retaliation, which is sort of pumped in within our environment. Again, it's sort of like one of the codes. It's like, if it's an eye for an eye.
Yeah.
If you trouble me, I'm going to trouble you back.
Exactly.
And it was something that was sort of flew around, and it was sort of embedded from young. So that was option A. Option B was a choice of basically becoming a recluse. And that's what I did for I want to say, the best part of a year in the beginning. Although there were still certain things I was sort of still talking to people as such, but I became a recluse. Like, I didn't really go out the house. I didn't socialise as much. So that was option B. And then option C was sort of be pro what's happened to me. Like, let's go out, let's campaign, let's stop this happening to other young people and people who are in my circumstances. And how can I help? Like, what can I do? I sort of went for option B to begin with.
Yeah.
And I think that was wise, because it was time for me to recover. And just to go into the nature of my attack and the actual injury, it severed my left vocal cord. So I was unable to speak for 6 months. And then I had speech therapy after that to empower me to get my voice back to where it stands today. And it's never the same, and it never will be the same again. But I'm lucky to have the voice that I have, which I'm grateful for. So within that sort of period in the hospital, there was an organisation called Red Thread who supported me within my stay. And then obviously coming out of hospital, they gave me some support as well. And after like a 6-week window period, they sort of opened opportunity up to me to say, do you want to campaign for our organisation, our charity, on knife crime? I was kind of unsure how to take it at the time. But again, obviously, I couldn't really speak and stuff, so they just supported me. And I think it was around, I want to say like 8-9 months later after the attack, I gave my first speech. And that was at City Hall. Sadiq Khan was there. And it was in front of like 150 people. And to even just sort of to go back, like, never would I have dreamed that I'd be speaking in front of 150 people about my situation, my attack, and how I'm looking to support other young people. So that's sort of like one of my proudest moments as such, given obviously within that sort of year period. Moving on from there, I've just done countless things to campaign locally. And then moving more nationally, been to 10 Downing Street. I met them, Prime Minister Theresa May. So yeah, there's a lot of things that I've done. That's what's made me sharpen up and made me believe that I can be a lot more of me, and I can give more. I can give more, I can help more. And that's what's empowered me to be able to speak the way I do in many ways.
And you almost had your voice taken away from you, and now you're using your voice for good.
I always say to people, I could have spent the next 30 years in prison.
If you took option one.
If I took option one, to seek revenge and to take it to that extreme. He nearly took my life. So it's a case of would I have took it there?
Yeah.
But I always say to people, so I'm going to spend the next 30 years of my life now helping other people. I wouldn't have robbed myself of 30 years. I'd have robbed my children of 30 years. I'd have took it from them. Like, who am I to put them in a position where they've got to see their dad sitting behind that table that we unfortunately had that discussion over. And it just put me on a path of wanting to do well.
Because I'd already started taking part in restorative justice process and was on doing some media stuff when that incident happened with you. And you went to a hospital, and I can remember getting a call from your brother saying what happened. And I was with my kid, and I got the phone call, and I went into the kitchen, and I fucking started screaming. Like, going mad. And my partner at the time, she was like, what the hell's going on? I'll tell you what was happening, because I already knew about the option 1, 2, 3. Do you know what I mean? But I knew that even me, as my very close friend, been stabbed, right, nearly been killed, option 1 is what I wanted to do. But I had to cry it out. In the because of the journey I've been on, and the talking to my victims and understanding the harm, do you know what I mean, and the importance of breaking those cycles of violence, I knew that I would never jeopardize myself and my kids to retaliate for you on your behalf.
But that's you, that our friendship from back
Yeah.
then. That's because people don't understand that still plays a part of us.
Yeah.
We don't ever disappear. It's
Yeah.
we learn to control and suppress.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what you're talking about.
And that's what happened. Like, and obviously that was quite a while ago. But I was like in the kitchen and just like crying, like I fucking can't.
Yeah.
I can't do anything. And then obviously I came up to the hospital and kind of I just hoped that you would find a peaceful path, do you know what I mean, of finding your voice and finding a way that, you know, wasn't going to end up causing loads of trauma and grief for everyone. And you did. And since then, you know, through normal life of being parents and working and everything else, we've supported each other, and we'll get onto that at the end in terms of like where we're at now in terms of our friendship. But what can be done, I guess, to support other people to break those cycles? Because this whole conversation has been about how those cycles are created from our environment, and then shifting towards how those cycles then get broken.
My number one thing is, and not to give us too much credit, but I think it's people like ourselves to come out and speak. That we need to talk to make people feel comfortable to say it's okay to step out of that ring. It's okay to step out of that environment. And I think really that's what it takes, because people need encouragement.
Yeah. And find new ways of doing things and finding their voices in a different way that's going to support them and their community instead of bringing themselves and their community down.
I think it's empowering themselves as well to break the mold.
Yeah.
And just seeing a bit earlier on, because I think it took me too long to see what else was out there. Like, I never really thought about going to plays and stuff before, and the different amount of people that you meet, of even just coming to a place like a play, it takes you out
going
of
to
that.
the theatre, going for a bike ride, going hiking. I mean, all the little things that we've kind of like,
because we always push to one side, because it's like, well, that's what they do. We don't do that. We'd rather stand on the block. So, and just to sort of touch on what we can do more at government level is stop treating everyone the same. Like, stop painting everyone with one brush. Like we're saying, going back to that pressure cooker of Meadows, where like we've got a lot of good people. The sad reality is, I'd say there's only 5%, 5 to 7%, of bad people within a community such as Meadows. But they paint the picture for everyone else,
everyone
else is getting on with their daily life.
Everyone else is going to work or doing whatever.
And that's what other people don't see. So people will avoid a community like the Meadows, and likewise St Anne's, Radford, or other communities in Nottingham as a whole, and not only in Nottingham but in the country, because of these small pockets of people. Like, let's support them people, but also give credit to the people who are doing well. So I think the government need to stop painting everyone with a brush and stop taking away libraries.
I think exactly, stop taking away libraries.
and youth clubs and stuff like that.
Yeah. It's fair to say, Kai, that we've both been on a big journey, and I hope the audience can appreciate from the time that we've been able to have this conversation, the kind of, you know, where we've both come from and where we're both at now today.
We have.
What have you learned from our friendship? And I guess what I'm asking is, what makes a good friend?
It's just to be open and honest, like, and that means if you're feeling shit, just ring me and tell me you're feeling shit, because there's too many times before where I've sat sometimes in a dark place and not expressed anything to anyone. And all that does is you just bottle it up, and then it puts you in a headspace of where you're not mentally fit. And I don't mean that you crazily got mental health, but it's you're not seeing things straight, and it's like the whole world's against you. So it's nice to be able to pick up that phone and call people, and call good friends like yourself to have that conversation. Like, I'd encourage people to talk and be open like we do. Like you know, at times, sometimes you've rang me at like 11, 12 o'clock at night, and you're driving home, and it's like, Kai, I just need to pick up the phone for a minute. Let's have a conversation. Or you'll turn up and say, oh, I'm knocking around. Are you free to talk? It comes down to like our old principles of like being loyal, and obviously we can forget that number one rule of snitching, because at the end of the day, it's about supporting each other. And if anything such as this sort of situation happened to you or me or anyone else, you'd want people to see justice now. But I think it's about being loyal and supporting, and it's almost some of them older morals is still brought in, and it still vibes in our relationship now.
It's just transferring it into a more productive way.
He just transfers it.
And the analogy I like to use is, back in the day, we used to have each other's back, or we used to think that the way we had each other's back was by potentially being violent or getting involved and stuck in certain situations to prove my care or my love for you.
Yeah.
But now, the best way I can be a friend or prove my kind of like care and support and loyalty is by being there to support, to talk to you when you're not feeling great, or going and doing different things, like going to the theatre or doing different experiences where we're both like learning something new, or being on the end of the
creating
phone,
opportunities for each other,
helping with a CV, like whatever it is. You know what I mean? Like that's how you're going to actually have someone's back. And
that's it's the same thing. The way I see it as in. It's almost like riding out for each other. Yeah. Like rather than saying, "Oh yeah, let's go and do a mazza," and showing in our peer groups, something's happening. It's like, well, let's go to the play. Let's ride out. We're still doing the same thing, but in different ways. It's it's almost like I'm riding out today.
So that's the challenge to the audience members and community members: is how do we create those types of friendship groups in those estates and in those environments? Yeah. How do we encourage them to have each other's backs for the right reasons?
Exactly. Yourself is sort of a good starting point and a presence, and someone to sort of, I don't want to say idolize, but a positive role model. Like, and his people need to see people like yourself who can turn a journey from a negative to a positive. Yeah. And likewise with myself, we've managed to do that and coin that. So yeah, it's been a long road. It's
been a long road, and now we're here on the stage at the Playhouse.
Well, we're sitting in the Meadows. The Meadows, it's kind of crazy. The contrast, and obviously this tunnel, for people who don't know, and for someone who are watching by video, and someone who may be listening by podcast, we're sitting next to a tunnel on a stage in the Playhouse. I want to say not too far from the Meadows, to be fair, from where this is all took place. So it's sort of brought it full around. So.
Akai, honour to have you on the show as my first guest. Thank you so much. Love as always, and we'll keep the conversation going.
We'll keep it moving.
Yes. Next week, I'll be talking to Wendy, my probation officer. I talked to her about what I was like both before and after prison. We also speak about how she set the wheels in motion for me taking part in restorative justice and speaking with the parents of the man I killed. Be sure to give it a listen. In season 2 and beyond, it is super important for me to make sure I deliver a podcast that brings you the most value possible. And so I need your help. So if you could hit subscribe and follow, I'd really appreciate it.